Poke the Bear is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 153. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Conor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. We're recording. Before we start, any big 4th of July plans for you?
Well, I'm kind of dressed up. I don't know if you can see. I got a little margarita polo on, so I'm ready to rock and roll. Again, we'll be over at Warrior all day on Saturday, the day this drops, covering the start of free agency. We say the start of free agency. Mostly everything happens on Saturday. Like everyone's cap is pretty much spent to the max by the end of day on Saturday anyway. So we'll be busy with that. But otherwise, just chilling. Might do a cookout a little bit later on this week. We'll see kind of what happens, but it's a busy stretch of the year. It's like the NHL doesn't realize that, everyone can all gallivant and chill down in Nashville for a week or so. That's fun. All the plebs up here. We got 4th of July. We got cookouts. Can't do it. Got this one. We got Dev Camp just a few days from now.
Is the NHL anti-America, putting all this stuff around the 4th of July? The people are wondering this. The people know we're asking the tough questions up here in Boston. I am back from Buffalo, by the way.
Welcome back.
Not a heck of a lot up there. not a ton going on. Not a ton going on. Nonetheless, happy to be back. So the big news, obviously, with the Bruins is cap space, and they've cleared some. They traded Taylor Hall. They bought out Mike Riley. They currently have $13.5 million in cap space as of recording this on Friday. And the question is, do they need to clear more? Because again, there are guys that there are still RFAs. They've put out qualifying offers to pretty much everybody except for Samuel Asselin, and there's one other that I'm blanking on.
Kai Wisman, who I think he signed back in Germany. I know he's back in Europe.
Yeah, so two there, they've issued qualifying offers to Frederick and Swayman. I know those are the two big ones. Is there a chance the Bruins need to clear more cap space, Conor?
It can certainly help you out in terms of being best equipped for whatever you're expecting on Saturday. It's just kind of what moves are there to be made. I think we all know the potential targets at this point, especially if you're looking like a pure hockey trade, then anyone's on the table, of course, right? But in terms of just trying to dump salary, guys we mentioned before, Olmark, Forbort, Grizzly, those are kind of the three that stick out. But I think what people are starting to pick up on, is the market set enough, or is it even, conducive for the Bruins to even move guys when these teams that do have cap space are just obliterating these teams? Like, it's not one thing of having just really bad leverage. They are chopping teams up and robbing them blind in terms of these things. I mean, not only you look at moving on from Taylor Hall and the fact that you get two guys in Mitchell and Regula who maybe there's something there, but I still think they're kind of more fringe guys. So that's not great anyway. But like people mention like Olmark and, you have to trade Olmark this offseason because his value's never been higher. That's valid, but does the market agree with that? Or is the market going to cater to what we expect it to be if you were to move a guy like Olmark? Because if Don Sweeney was fielding offers for him and you got a first-round pick or you get a legit young piece back or something like that, then it probably makes a very tough decision for Sweeney anyway, a little bit easier to stomach. But if you're Sweeney, you're trying to move the reigning Vezina Trophy winner, a guy that if you keep him with Swayman, is going to be kind of the cornerstone of how you're going to be competitive or at least be in the mix next year. You're not moving him for a 4th round pick or anything like that, right?
Can you imagine?
That's you have to look at just how this market is. Like, looking even at the Islanders, right? Like, Josh Bailey is 33, but still a very productive winger, I think. They traded him and a 2nd round pick just for future consideration, just for Chicago to buy him out. Like, again, you look at just the way the market is now, even like Grizzly. Grizzly is still a guy that if you're trading him, what would you say his value is in terms of if it was just like a straight cap dump? Still a 3rd, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's a top 4 defenseman in the NHL.
Yes, he's still a very valuable player, as much as I think some people the verdict is out in terms of for a few people. He still should net you a very solid return, especially if it's just a straight cap dump. What is it right now, the way this market is? Is Chicago asking of getting a 5th back or something, right? Like, I just think you look at Sweeney and the moves he's made. I think he's wanted to shed more cap space because I think we know the route in terms of how this team stays competitive. It's you hope one of Bergeron and Krejci come back, and you're still in a pretty good spot to at least be in the mix. But the way the cap is now and what you'd have to do to shave off more cap space based on just pure cap dump trades doesn't look all that good for the Bruins right now in terms of just having that leeway to do so. Like I think Don Sweeney would love to move a player or two, but not if the return is a 4th or a 5th round pick.
Especially if it's going to crush you competitively next year, right? Like you actually need some left shot defenders. Like if you trade out Grzelcyk or trade out Forbort, Riley's gone now, so you really just have Lindholm and you have Zaboral, and that's it. Like so again, you want to be competitive next year, and it goes back to like I think we've both said a lot during this offseason. If you have the right deal for Ullmark, makes sense. Like trade him high, like you have Swayman there waiting in the wings. But as you said, the market clearly stinks. How about Chicago, though? I mean, what a time to rebuild. I mean, this really is like the peak time to rebuild if you're them. You get the number 1 pick in Bedard. You have another 1st-round pick. I think it was like 19. They got Oliver Moore. You fleece all of these teams to get, to buy out Bailey and just basically pick up a 2nd-round pick. And you get, Taylor Hall, who can help out, and Nick Foligno, same thing. $4 million, though, for Nick Foligno. By the way, good for Nick Foligno. Hell yeah, dude. Go get that bag. I mean, enjoy that. Good for him. But it hits at the bigger thing. If we can tie Bertuzzi into this, can the Bruins re-sign Tyler Bertuzzi? Every report so far has signaled to no. Everything said that's come out of the Bruins camp has been no. I'm curious though, if you trade Taylor Hall for nothing, you dump the $6 million off, you don't retain any of it. Is there a bigger play here? Is it like a Scheifele? Is there something that they're working on? Now, again, I don't know how you're getting him in a trade that doesn't include an Ullmark, or that, maybe it's centered around like Lysell. But there's got to be a bigger plan here, right? Right? I mean, maybe not. And it's just they just want to have space.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough to get like a full read on just the way this offseason is going to play out. Even last year, when it's like, all right, with Bergeron and Krejci coming back, we kind of knew by the end of June, right, of like what was going to happen. It just took a little while to get the money right and all those things. And like for the Bruins and Bruins fans, they've had the luxury of every year more or less knowing what to expect, right, in terms of when you have guys like Bergeron and Krejci, Marchand and Raskinet and Chara, these guys, you kind of knew. It's like every offseason was following like the same kind of similar script. Every Bruins offseason was like a new Fast and Furious movie. Maybe there's like a few twists and turns here or there, but you know what shit's going to be in there. There's going to be a lot of cars, and Vin Diesel's going to talk about family. You kind of know what the points are going to be there. Now they're in kind of a Tarantino nonlinear structure where everything is kind of disjointed. You're waiting for you have the shoe to drop, and when it does, shit can go haywire. That's kind of what the Bruins are in right now, where it's like, all right, are they just trying to free up cap space to get Bertuzzi because they know one of Bergeron and Krejci are back? Which again, I think if you sign Swayman, as we all expect, you retain Bertuzzi and Bergeron's coming back, you got a plan in place, right? Like, and you're looking pretty good. All things considered, you inject younger players into the lineup around a guy like Coyle, you're good to go. And all of a sudden, next year you have a bunch of cap room, and you can retool more aggressively. But as you said, are they just freeing up cap space just to be financially flexible? Are they saving up because they know Bergeron and Krejci aren't coming back and they are targeting a center? Like, are they trying to trade for a guy like Elias Lindholm or someone like that? There's no like set in stone answer. Like, if you ask me still, I'll say it until we get the notification from the Bruins. They send out a graphic of like, what a career, what a legend. Like, congrats, Bergie, on your retirement. Until we get that notification, like, I'm still going with the assumption I think he's back. Even with like what kind of Cam Neely said, I still think he's the guy that is back in the spot, and you kind of need him. You need just the guy to bail you out in terms of being a top 6 center that kind of sets everything else into place. But it's tough to get like just a full read on in terms of what the grand scheme is this year. It's like you can see next year with the money they have of how they can really kind of switch things up. But right now it's like, what do they know? It's like, what's Don Sweeney cooking? And it's like, we don't really have that set plan when you look at just how many question marks there are and how much limited leeway you have to really kind of shift around this roster.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's like a pick your own adventure type thing. There's so many different ways you can do this. The Bergeron thing's interesting. You know, at the start of the offseason, I was sort of like, you know, hey, if they need to move on and start a new era here, go for it. But as the offseason's gone on longer,
You're
it's
like,
like,
wait,
actually, you might need Patrice Bergeron next year. And by might, I mean you do. You really need him. And there was an interesting tweet from Zdenek Jonda about David Krejci. David Krejci is still undecided about the future. He's attracted by the WC in Prague. So because of that, he did not rule out that he is also considering an extra league. But according to his own words, he will not start the season right away, but maybe sometime around Christmas. So Krejci's just doing his own thing here. There's also the option that it ends completely, which I get you've earned it at that point. Your career, you can do what you want. Again, we haven't really been banking on Krejci being back. I don't think we've once been like, oh, he's got to be back. So again, I go back to this, and you mentioned it. If you can re-sign Bertuzzi, suddenly your top six is DeBrusk, Bergeron, Marchand, and Bertuzzi, Zacha, Pastrnak, and you're okay on D. You know, you're not as good as you were at the end of last year. Your bottom six, you know, Frederick, Coyle, maybe Lysell, and then your fourth line is kind of a mix of younger players. You see what works. You have a whole season to figure it out. That team's competitive. You know, are they winning a President's Trophy? Hopefully not. Hopefully they don't win the President's Trophy, but they're competitive and they're in it. And I think that's what people want. I don't think people have these expectations next year of this juggernaut team. Now, does Patrice Bergeron want to come back to that? Does Patrice Bergeron want to come back to a team that might fight for a wild card spot? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the toughest thing, right? And I think I say this going off of a lot of assumptions. I think when you look at just kind of trying to read the tea leaves in terms of why he'd want to come back, and you can look at that, he's still a very good player. You look at, you know, the small things we mentioned, like the centennial season, being the captain for that, Marchand's 1,000th games coming up, all those things. I also think for Bergeron, it's a guy who's obviously been here his whole career, but in terms of leaving the franchise off in a good spot, it's not to say that he needs to leave as like they've got this next wave of talent. It's not like if Jamie Benn retired or someone, you look at just how many young players the Stars have, where it's like, all right, hand the keys off. It will never be that in terms of when Bergeron does decide to retire, but you look at just how much of a bind this team is in, where if he leaves, it's right now, barring a hockey trade where you're giving up more assets, it's Coyle and Zacha with, like, if Patrice's not back, Georgi Merkulov in the top six, right? Like,
we discussed this last night over text. I mean, it's
like with no
crazy.
first round picks, right? Where you can't really afford to just be like, we're taking a step back. You can't do that.
And this is with Bertuzzi not re-signed.
Yes. So, like, if you're Bergeron and that's the case, like, it's one thing where you don't want to, like, you know, it's your career. You got other more important things than just the game of hockey to worry about, obviously. But I think for him, who's so cognizant of putting this franchise in a good spot, if you come back for another year, you help them kind of navigate through this cap crunch, and then you retire next year, where we'll see what happens. You're still going to be, I think, a pretty competitive team if you have a guy like him back. You have opportunity for younger guys like Merkulov or Lysell or Lauko or McLaughlin or all these guys to maybe have a chance to prove themselves. They could be viable NHLs by next year, and you've got $35 million in cap space, not even factoring in the cap increase in the ceiling there. Like, if you retire next year, if you're Bergeron after the centennial season, you're in a pretty good spot, right? Like, you're leaving at least on a better note that, all right, they can go and sign a guy like Elias Lindholm or someone else like that, and you can kind of forge that next chapter. Do it this year. Again, it's not to like be like, Bergeron, you can't do it because this guy's given everything to this team. But in terms of just where this team is at, they desperately need him back.
They do. And again, I guess if Bergeron doesn't come back, you still need Bertuzzi if you want to compete at all. If you don't want to compete, if you are if you say to your McAvoys and your Lindholms and your Pasternaks and say, look, we're not going to be that great for the next 2 years, but hang on, we're going to be good after that. Then maybe you don't want Bertuzzi, right? Maybe that's a contract that you don't want on the books. But my guess is they still want to compete. They're still going to compete. This team isn't going to stink. And I think even, you know, if they did come back with Coyle and Zacha, I still think they're somewhat competitive. I don't think they are. I think they squeak into the playoffs, if that. It puts more of an emphasis, though, on you need Ullmark and Swayman in net. You have to just freaking use both of them in the playoffs.
Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets for up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything, from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to crush the first home run of the game. And frankly, that's the best part of FanDuel. You can bet on anything. You want to wager on the odds of how many dingers Rafael Devers will hit this year? Be my guest. Maybe the Bruins over-under for wins next season. Go for it. So bet now on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/Boston to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball.
I have come to the point where I do want this next year to be the bottom 6 where the kids, you figure out who can play. Merkulov, Lysell, Beecher, Lauko, McLaughlin, see what you got. And you already have AJ Greer. And I don't know if I love the idea of Lucic potentially taking away playing time from a younger player. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you look at the state of this team now. If you're the Bruins, I think if you're trying to formulate a good fourth line, it's like you have like at least 2 very strong veterans there and a younger player that you can ease in there. Like if the Bruins had a bunch of cap space, you know what they'd probably love is like either sign Nosek or a guy similar to him that's a little bit younger, keep Hathaway, and then have like a guy like Lauko there and you're good to go, right? That's like if you had cap space, you don't have that luxury now. Like you've got to fill right now, what is it, 7 forward spots with $13 million in cap space.
Ooh,
You don't have the luxury to, pick and choose in terms of like those fourth line guys worth 2.25, right? Like even
Hathaway's in that group.
Right. Like, and again, I think if you give him a full season, Hathaway probably gives you 10, 12, 13, 14 goals and gives you a bunch of hits and like gives you, what you need out of that fourth line spot. But the Bruins aren't in that luxury. They need to right now find guys who want to be here for cheap. And that's what matters, just being back here and in that spot. And if you're replacing him with like, or Foligno with a guy like Lucic, who's significantly cheaper, kind of what you have to do. And I think that you can't just roll out, I think, a fourth line of, let's say it's Lauko, McLaughlin, Beecher, and, someone else on the right side, right? Like Lauko, McLaughlin, and Beecher as a 3-man unit. It's great in principle, but those guys are going to get rocked, in the fourth line together. Like, so if you tell me the fourth line this upcoming year is going to be Lucic, Beecher, and then McLaughlin, Lauko, whoever you want to formulate it, you have a guy that will hold other teams accountable to take liberties with the younger players. I get it. I think that's the biggest thing.
No, I get it as well. I get that.
And yeah, it's just something where is an ideal situation. Is he the same guy you want to have? Is he the guy that's going to put you over the top? I don't know about that. Like, he still is going to bring you some things that you do value, even though the speed is a little concerning when you look at just how quickly, like, Vegas's bottom 6 is. But again, that's kind of the hand you're dealt in terms of you need to find guys. Like, if you're spending in free agency, you're finding guys who've been here before who want to come back, or reclamation projects. You got to find guys willing to sign for a year, 2 years at 1.5. That's easier said than done.
The Moneyball Bruins. Bruins. The other thing is forecheck aspect. I mean, he does provide something there if you really want to go for it, is if you want to go there. I agree. You can't roll out a fourth line of just kids. You can't do it. But still there's a part of me that's like, if he's taking a spot and not pulling his weight, it's just going to be like, oh. The other thing is reunions don't always work. And I'm not saying that he won't like it here. He will love it. And fans will typically love him. But, watching him not play or not play well, and it's like, oh, that's, it's
going to lasting impression. It'll be interesting to see just how he fits in there. Because again, it's the copycat part of the league too, where I think everyone looks at the speed, and I think that is where the league is going. But then like Tampa's been that kind of outlier that's kind of been set in their ways of everyone's like, you don't need to invest in a goaltending. Look at like Aiden Hill, these guys. Tampa has like Vasilevsky, like they've got their guy in place that's led them. You look at like how quick you know, Vegas's forecheck was, or you look at like how quick like the bottom six of Carolina's is, Tampa's bottom six, bunch of big old beefy boys. What a crop.
What a crop.
That is what Tampa's bottom six has been for years. Guys like Perry,
little
and
buff,
Maroon.
big buff boys.
Yes,
big buff
like
boys.
guys like Pat Maroon and Corey Perry and those players. Like, there's value in that as well. It's not to say that like Lucic is going to just be like a wrecking crew, what have you. And the foot speed is something to be monitored there, but he still couldn't bring, I think, some value, especially if he gets you 10 goals, a bunch of fights, a lot of hits, and wears teams down for 900,000. You take that, especially this year with the way the cap is.
You take it. He might earn himself some sort of rev sharing or something from all the jerseys that are gonna get sold of the Lucic 17. Oh my God.
I saw someone tweeted out it was like the screen grab from Breaking Bad when Walt has all of his money in that gigantic like pile in the storage unit, and it was like North End sandwich shops. Now that Lucic is back in town, that man's gonna just go to Monica's Mercado again. Like, he's gonna just make the rounds, man. He's gonna be happy to be back.
Good for him. Honest to God,
good for Lucic. Yes.
Yeah, honestly, a good dude, and I'm excited to see, you know, when he comes back, what he's like with media and stuff. And this is home. I mean, he loved it here, and he never wanted to leave. He didn't want to be dealt, and he's back. And the other thing is, I think he did a story. I think it was with Pierre LeBrun. I could be mixing up my insiders, but I think it was Pierre LeBrun. And Lucic was saying how, you know, it feels better now that huge contract is off of him, because the pressures of that were just a lot. And now he'll play veteran minimum, play some fourth line minutes for the Bruins, and he'll be back where he wants to be. And you know what? Good for him. Like, good for him. In terms of a fit, probably fits. We'll see how that works out. Free agency in general. You know, over the years, I think it was that Lucic 2016 free agency that was one of the first where people were like, wait, maybe we shouldn't build our team through free agency. That might not be the best idea in the world. Free agency this year, in terms of the Bruins' needs, you know, coming in, I would say, you know, maybe if you end up deciding to deal a Grzelcyk or a Forbert, a depth left shot defenseman never hurts anybody. You can always use depth back there. You do have some depth on the right side, so maybe the left is where you want to look at. Now that Duchene's out there, though, I'm curious. It's one of those things. Again, if Bergeron comes back, and you're fine, you don't need Duchene. And I think Duchene's gonna have a lot of suitors in general. But an interesting one. I don't think you need him. If Bergeron does come back and you have Bergeron and Zacha, I mean, Duchene, you don't really need. What do you think?
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting just how this free agency market, you know, pans out, because it's almost like if you're the Bruins and you kind of wait things out and wait for some of these big ticket guys to go. Again, I think they want to sign Bertuzzi, but I got like a sinking feeling we're going to see him sign a 6-year, $42 million contract somewhere and be like, I don't know about that, right? Like, I think he's going to get a contract like that out on the open market. So, but if you're the Bruins and you wait things out, you kind of look at all these guys that aren't being retained or aren't getting qualified offers. There's a lot of like interesting guys that I think in a normal year, if like the NHL decided to like raise their salary cap for once and paid off their escrow, there'd be guys that I think are making 2.5, 3.5 million that are, what are they making this year? Like $1 million, $1.5 million? Because it's not like the Bruins are the only team that's, you know, doesn't have a lot of fiscal flexibility. There's a lot. I think the Bruins are, I want to say it was something, they were like 14th in terms of available cap space. Like, they are not worse off. There's a lot of other teams who are really, really stuck.
I think the Oilers are in a bad spot, aren't they?
Yeah, there are a lot of teams that do not have the leeway to do that. Unless like the Blackhawks are signing everyone or some of these other players. Even teams that just a few weeks ago had a lot are committing to, like the Devils had a bunch, but they're committing a lot to get guys like Timo Meier. We'll see what happens if they trade for a guy like Hellebuck, right? That's a guy that's been linked to, and what his new contract's going to be like.
Oh, for some reason on Twitter, the For You page, I saw one Devils tweet, and I've seen a ton, and it's just people like in awe over like everyone's under 9 million. They're going to win a cup next year. It's like, oh, why is that my For You page? You know, like, okay, great.
Yeah, like I literally just like right now, Morgan Geeky and Daniel Sprong also didn't get qualifying offers. There's like a lot of like solid middle six guys or guys that can fit into different roles on this team or on Bruins, but many teams that where's like the money going to be, right? Like there's like a pool of like 55, 60 players I think a lot of teams would like to have, but where's the money going, right?
Max
like, unless
Comtois just didn't get a qualifying offer.
Yeah, like there's a lot of players like that if you're Bruins and you wait things out, is a guy like Miles Wood going to be available for like $1 million, $1.5 million, right? Like those are the kind of the situations where you wait things out. Now, again, it's going to depend on what other moves the Bruins make. Like if you, again, sign Duchesne and that's $5 million or something, all right. If you sign Blake Wheeler, even if Blake Wheeler is going to take a step down and it's $3 million, right? If you wait things out, are you going to get like a few really solid players that would be making 3.5 for one? Like that could be the case. So it's gonna be really interesting to see. The Bruins don't seem to be in a really advantageous spot right now, but I'm curious if you wait things out, even like just later on Saturday, or even dragging into the off season, once you get past that first feeding frenzy, and a lot of teams have already spent to the cap on the 5, 6, 7, 8 big name guys out there. There could be a lot of value to be had if you're the Bruins and you wait things out a little bit. So be interesting to see if that kind of dynamic flips in the favor of Boston as it goes forward. Because again, if you sign a few of these guys, Miles Wood's a guy that again comes off an injury, but could bring value. Like Connor Brown, really good middle six guy. Like what's he going to be signing for, right? Like there's so many of these other players out there who could fit in. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's guy we talked about, that if you're the Bruins, you got to get creative and you got to find ways to add value. And as much people want it to be just a full-on youth movement, that's going to lot of some of these guys, right? I don't think you're asking for Lysell to make that huge jump right now. You'd love it to happen, but it's asking a lot out of a guy, right? So very curious, but I think those are the guys you have to look at. Wood, Ekman-Larsson, Lucic, obviously, Brown. You got to find these value adds. It's kind of pretty much you're doing Moneyball. But again, that's kind of the route you have to do.
You are. And again, if Bergeron's returning, I said this earlier, you have to still compete. Like, I don't think he's coming back to be a youth movement. I think if he comes back, he's coming back to be a part of a team that's competitive. And a perfect way to get competitive is, that third line, Frederick Coyle, add a right side guy like a Connor Brown, or you find, as you said, a value middle six, bottom six forward. And suddenly you have something there, right? You're a little bit deeper, and you make up for the loss of, a Craig Smith last year or a Garnet Hathaway. I was reading The Athletic. Fluto seemed pretty, not sure, but he kept mentioning Hathaway playing with Lucic and like Beecher down the middle. I'm thinking like, does he know something about Hathaway? Like, is there a chance that Hathaway returns? I don't know. I mean, again, Hathaway's a local guy. Maybe he's so into New England Hockey Journal, he can't leave the area. So it's, who isn't? But I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens with free agency by the time you listeners listen. Maybe there'll be already stuff. Bruins will already have done some things. But in that case, they're gonna have to read some coverage of it. So Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at Boston.com and Boston Globe?
Yeah, we're gonna have you covered throughout this offseason. Again, we are now in the thick of it. Finally, Evan. We actually
I like
almost too much to talk about, but it's great, right? So we're gonna have plenty to dissect in terms of free agency. Again, feels like a lot of moves are going to happen tomorrow, but I think if the market kind of plays out how we said, could be signings all throughout next week during dev camp and moving forward in terms of that. So we'll have you covered every step of the way through free agency, trades, dev camp, all that stuff over at Boston.com. So please read over there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. And remember to go subscribe to New England Hockey Journal. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your week.